Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing. We're back after some technical difficulties yesterday, so apologies for that. Today I'm joined by Alison McConnell. How's it going, Alison?
Very well, thank you, Sean. Yourself?
Good, yeah. Fine and dandy. So let's get straight into it. Let's talk about Leverkusen. Widely regarded as the best team in Celtic's group, I would say. Second in the German Bundesliga behind Bayern Munich. One loss all season, which, as Celtic fans will be familiar with, a 4-3 defeat. That was to Borussia Dortmund, of all teams. Celtic, on the other hand, still injury ravaged. Can't really string a run of wins together. And ultimately not in very good form at the moment. But the game is at Parkhead, where despite the draw with Dundee United, they've actually been really good this season. So what's your assessment of Celtic's chances overall?
I think it's an incredibly tough game for them to go into, given the form that they've exhibited over the last few weeks. I think it's a fairly daunting challenge that lies ahead. I think you know what to expect from Leverkusen. I think they'll be very organised. They'll be very technically good on the ball. I think they'll attack. I think they'll have goals in them. Obviously, a few familiar faces for people to know and recognise. I would have to say if Celtic were to take anything from this game, I think it would be seen as a bonus. I think just now the priority is probably league commitments and finding a return to domestic form. But at the same time, I don't think you want to be getting into this game and coming off it on the back of another morale-sapping defeat. I think you've got to go and try and give a decent account of yourselves. It's a second-tier competition in the Europa League, but I think there is an argument that Bayer Leverkusen could be regarded at some points as a Champions League opponent in terms of their status, and I think it's up to Celtic now to go and try and put in a decent performance and see where it takes them.
You mentioned there that Bayer Leverkusen could be considered a Champions League quality team. As I said at the start of the show, I think that's probably been borne out by how they've started the Bundesliga season. It's one of the best leagues in the world, and they're second behind only Bayern Munich. So they're obviously going well in the league. They also won their first game in the Europa League group against Ferencváros 2-1. During that game, a certain Jeremy Frimpong got 2 assists, but they've also got another few names you kind of referenced that they might have a few. One in particular for Scotland fans that will maybe give them shivers is Patrick Schick, a big Czech striker that scored twice at Hampden during the Euros this summer. But what I noticed when I was looking at them is they rested a couple of players for that game against Ferencváros. You could say it's maybe because Ferencváros are statistically meant to be the weakest team in the group. But what's your feelings on Leverkusen ahead of the game? Would you expect them to be as full strength as they can be, considering it's an away trip to Parkhead, or potentially rest a couple of players again?
I think they'll maybe fancy going with a relatively strong team, because if they get ahead of steam up early on in the Europa League campaign, then they can bank the points and then afford to step off a bit if they assure qualification and focus on league commitments too. Mm-hmm. I think it will be quite a strong team. I think they're clearly the group favourites to progress, and I think I don't think you can underestimate just how tough a night I think it will be for Celtic tomorrow.
In terms of the Celtic team, I suppose the question really would be: is there anything much that Ange Postecoglou can really do? As far as he said the other day, Cal McGregor won't be back for it, although Juranovic might be. I've mentioned a couple of times actually on Juranovic. I've mentioned a couple of times before when we've been doing predicted lineups, because I went with ball and goalie twice in a row, I think, there to start, and it didn't. I was mostly referencing the danger of starting both first team right backs regularly, and I think we got a glimpse of what that might be like, the dangers of that on Sunday when Juranovic went down injured against Dundee United. So is there any chance of a few changes to the starting lineup in your opinion?
I think it really depends on availability rather than selection issues. I think it's really a question for who is capable of going in and starting the game, who has the fitness to do it. I think that's where the real issue is in terms of availability. I think the squad has been fairly decimated by injuries. I think we've spoken about it ad nauseum over the last month about the lack of depth and what that entails. But I think there are very few options to change it. The one consideration I thought might be a potential is to play with with 2 holding midfielders. I know that requires a tweak in principle and a tweak in system from Ange Postecoglou, and I'm not sure that we've ever seen or heard any evidence that would incline us to believe he would go that way. But I think it might be one of the ways, a pragmatic approach to trying to contain Leverkusen tomorrow night. Whether or not that's something that he goes for, I don't know. But I think that would be a way to add a bit of solidity and a bit of steel to Celtic, because I think they've looked very, very soft through the middle over this last month.
Which 2 would you go for then if he was to play 2 holding midfielders? Again,
I think you're hindered by availability choices. I think there are very, very few that you can look at to play it, but it almost, I think, just points to McCarthy and Sorrell. I think you could potentially ask Rogic to play that role. I'm not sure how comfortable he would be there, but I think the 2 obvious choices would be the 2 that we've said.
Any chance of Nir Bitton getting a run out in defensive midfield anytime soon? He seems to be considered a centre-back by Ange, but let's not forget his primary natural position was sitting midfielder, and he has put in good performances, albeit years ago now, you could say, since he actually played regularly at centre mid.
I think it's a consideration. I think it's there, but I think the fact he hasn't featured at all would give you an indication of just where he is. I'm not sure how much he might have blotted his copybook in the early days with that red card, obviously, that I think was particularly costly. But the very fact that he's been cited so rarely, I think suggests that he might make it to the bench. I'm not sure if he'd be in consideration for a first team place, but as you've said, he has experience in that role. He's someone else who could come in. It could be that McCarthy's not fit after the weekend. He might not be available to play. And of course, it just might not be a system that the manager fancies either. So I think the fact he's there and he's available, and if he's fit, I think he has to come into the thinking. Whether or not he's done enough to start, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, at the start of the season, this might have been due to personnel issues as well, but he almost did. He started Sorrell and McGregor together with, I think, Turnbull ahead of them, which it's all well and good saying two sitting midfielders, but obviously when one of them is Callum McGregor and he's got licence to go slightly further forward, it's a different scenario, if you know what I mean. It's not quite as defensive as what it would be if it's Sorrell and McCarthy, but he has played, there has been games where he's not played Rogic and Turnbull together, although in the last couple of months that has been the go-to, and I've used the word kind of flog. I think in a way they've flogged Rogic and Turnbull as much as they can to start them both every game. Almost shines a spotlight on both, if not either of them, both of them, when they're not playing particularly well, like they've been accused of playing in the last few weeks. So in that respect, it might let you have one game changer on the bench as well. But as I say, when one of the sitting midfielders isn't Callum McGregor, it's almost, is it going to just be another method to play a pedestrian, ponderous type of game? So he very well might not go for it, but I can definitely see the logic in what you're saying, that it could be the wise choice to go for, even if it's maybe the antithesis of what he would opt for if everybody was available. I notice 2 seconds here, I'll just put up a comment. There it is. It's from Frank Brennan, just pointing out that Livingston was a must-win game after a European game, Dundee United was a must-win game after a cup game, and now Aberdeen on Sunday is a must-win game. So I've seen plenty of comments to that effect. So basically, do you agree with that point of view? I think you referenced it earlier in the show, but do you agree with that point of view, that actually out of the games that Celtic have got in the next few days, the Aberdeen game on Sunday is the more important one?
Without question. Absolutely without question. I think if you had to say just now, you sacrifice the Europa League and you put it to one side and you focus on domestic matters, I think people would accept that just now. It's not ideal. I think you want to be fighting on 2 fronts. I think you want to be considered a strong European force, but I think it's a case of needs must at the minute for Celtic. You've seen recent domestic performances have slipped. I think it's been poor, really, since the defeat at Ibrox. I think we know why. I think we could go over the reasons why and the loss of key players and what it's done for Celtic, but I would completely agree. You cannot afford to allow any more slip-ups in the league at all. I think Aberdeen are in are in their own mire at the minute in terms of the results and performances. I don't think they've won a game in the last 8. I think Stephen Glass is under a fair bit of pressure too. So I think you've got two fairly vulnerable teams meeting on Sunday, and I think, as we spoke about it earlier this week, it's about winning by any means necessary for Celtic in the league. I just don't think you can afford to lose any more ground and risk the danger of becoming marooned again, of slipping away. And then I think when that happens so early in the season, I think there's a danger that you just go into a sense of freefall. I think you have to keep your eye on the league, and I think I would agree. I think it's most certainly a game that Celtic need to win on Sunday.
So to sum it up, any sort of result, point or win tomorrow night, and you'll count it as a bonus?
Absolutely. I think I would have to say I would struggle to see Celtic take even a point. I think when you look at the evidence in front of you, look at where both teams are, compare and contrast form, compare and contrast personnel, I think the odds are stacked against Celtic taking anything from the game. I think it's obviously not the mindset that the team will go into the contest with, but I think over the piece, I think I would fear for Celtic in terms of the quality that Leverkusen have.
Well, on that note, as I've said all along about this Europa League group, it's going to be interesting one way or the other. So thanks everybody for joining us, and remember, if you're watching on YouTube, try and hit that subscribe button for us. So thanks again, and cheers for joining me, Alison.
Thank you.